So moving forward with the changing world that the coronavirus pandemic is creating for us, big changes are going to be in making money and income, and working with multi-generations. And that's going to be very critical for boomers and people of age, the ability to do that if you want to earn an income. Well, I've got really just one of the best people in the world to talk about this very issue and what we need to do to make sure that we can adapt and make that successful. So Marc Michaelson is an executive coach and leadership development facilitator and a consultant and an author, 35 years of experience in this. And we've been talking really for the last couple of months because he's working with some very notable companies in Silicon Valley, for instance, on this very issue. And Marc, I think first of all, lay the groundwork for us of the importance and the challenge of, let's say, the typical thing, but it being millennials and boomers being able to work together in the modern business climate.
Yeah, well, I think probably the thing that I'm seeing the most recently, and what's come to mind, and I'm trying to create some sort of frame of reference for this in a context, is that the folks that are entering the workforce today and have been there for a short time are not afraid of failure. So their interest in innovation and trying things and doing things that is sort of ready, fire, aim, if you will, is natural to them. They experiment, they're curious, they inquire, they want dialogue, they want to be collaborative. And in the boomer orientation, we grew up trying to do things the right way, to get it perfect. And you moved up in the corporate ladder if you were working in that environment because of your ability to do the right thing, follow orders, deal with command and control, all those sorts of things. The folks that are entering at the newer end of the continuum, the folks come out of college, been there 3 or 4 or 5 years, are folks who want to try things, who want to experiment, who want to break glass, if you will. And those boomers, managers, leaders who are curious to work with those folks to help them actually experiment with those kinds of ideas and do that kind of collaboration with somebody who has some wisdom, who has some experience, who's seen failures turn into innovation, and has also seen failures turn into horrible results, which could be very damaging to an organization. So the wisdom and the experience of a smart boomer working with an innovative, inquiring type of individual who's entering the workforce today is a perfect match. It's a mentoring relationship. It's a sage person working with somebody who has energy, curiosity, and ambition. And the combination of that chemistry is beautiful when it works right. When it doesn't, it creates friction, it creates resistance on both parties. And there's a lot of people saying yes when they really mean no, in order to keep their job, to transition or translate a imperfect situation until they find the next opportunity where somebody will grant them that opportunity. So boomers who have the flexibility, the curiosity, the appreciative inquiry to working with somebody who has that kind of energy that's willing to innovate and take chances, nice combination.
And I want to talk in just a moment about some of the things that we can do with our mindset, but still to stay in the foundation of what's going on. And by the way, a lot of those people who are a couple of years out of college are actually Gen Zers. You may be better off with a millennial because you're more mature. Wow. Okay, time does move on. But you brought up a really, in a previous discussion that we had, this thing about boomers adapting. It's not just about adapting to the way that millennials or Gen Zers think, you also brought up the point that this is the way a lot of businesses are nowadays. Now, it might not be this way with the insurance agency down the street, but
Right.
certainly in the tech world, but so many other sectors, it is this speed of velocity of changing, trying, fail fast, fail often.
Right.
So it's also a business mandate as much as it is a generational thing, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there are other issues that are sort of creeping into the dialogue, if you will, which is human resource, hiring practice, talent identification, how we form teams, how we make choices about who's on what team, and the flexibility from people to move from one team to another and not stay stagnant in one space. So the folks who are innovating, and it's not, the innovation is just not coming from the younger folks. It's the chemistry of the combination of the generations that creates the fire. That's the new energy, if you will, the energy that's creating the combination of the sage experience with the curiosity, appreciation, and desire to innovate quickly. And that, for me, what I'm starting to see that's not just resident in the technology environment. It's creeping into every sort of business possible. And as a result of that, for boomers who we're trying to communicate some tips today to, it's the more that they can increase their growth mindset to see themselves as lifelong learners, to be asking questions rather than thinking that their experience is more important than somebody else's new idealistic way of thinking. Those kinds of things clash a lot. So
Well,
go ahead, Paul.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, I was going to say this really applies because, I mean, both this is an overarching reality that's existed, but in so many people that I've been talking to, experts such as yourself, about how do we adapt to a very different world that's going to exist as a result of this pandemic, more than stay at home, but just how it is going to change the workplace, jobs. Maybe it's not jobs, it's ways that you earn an income, gig economy, all this other kind of things. It's talking about, so what so many people recommend that you do right now, for instance, is this thing where kind of do away with what you did and how you did it to what you can do and be capable of, and how can you apply it in the macro sense in this new world. But as you're talking about, how can I leverage not just my experience in a smart and inclusive way, but my skills and talents where it fits with the business mandate and the business imperative, I should say, and this broad, multi-age, multi-generation workforce, right? That I might need to skill up, but I've got the inherent abilities to bring something to the table if I do it in the right context.
Absolutely. The ability to bring your wisdom and experience to the table with folks who are, whether they're Gen Z or millennial or Gen X, that whole progression of age groups has your experience. You've been through that sort of path, if you will, and their path is slightly different than the one we had, but at the same time, it's relatable. And the more curious you are about their experience and being able to match your experience to theirs and find the chemistry for real constructive conversation and collaboration in thinking and problem solving and solution finding and innovation, that's where the chemistry is best. It's what I see with a lot of boomer managers and leaders who have arrived, if you will. They're at the top of the totem pole, if you will. They want to advise more than they want to be partnering.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
And I think that's and there's a time for that. The advice is appropriate. So it's almost like using your life experience situationally. So at times, it's a good idea to be providing advice as long as you set up that advice to be accepted by those folks who you're interacting with. And that requires you building trust, and the trust comes from you experiencing their world, showing them that you're interested in their thinking and their, how would I say, different experience at the same age when we were. Because anybody that has, you and I have children in the same sort of age bracket, I have to be very mindful of what I'm talking about right here when I'm interacting with my daughter. She has curiosity and interest and maturity that I didn't have at that age at all.
Same with mine.
It wasn't, not even close.
Yeah.
Now, she has some immaturities on things that are that I could bring value to in conversation, but I have to lean into her smarts to be able to open up her willingness to listen to me. And wise boomer managers are using those kinds of skills and those kinds of approaches in very smart ways. And I see that.
I think two things come to mind. The first place, you're right about that. And my major takeaway from what you just said is that, okay, my other business, the content creation production business, I have millennial clients. I have millennials working for me.
Sure.
Definitely sometimes there are challenges, whether it be communication, understanding, or just, this is something I've learned and you haven't yet. But I've learned you have to be really, like you said, sensitive to that. But by the same token, what I have to challenge myself is that I will find myself sometimes going, no, what are you talking about? And being, well, wait a minute, let's listen. Let's actually consider this. And once you get in the habit, once I've gotten in the habit of doing that, it really makes it more fun. It makes it more interesting. It makes it more exciting. It doesn't necessarily mean we do that, but it leads us to where we want to go, whatever. It's being prepared to be inclusive of it and really being open to, well, let's go that way. And at times, my experience, as well as my particular talents and skills, can make a contribution.
All right.
But that's harder to do than it sounds, or what's been your professional experience?
Well, I mean, you could be right or you could be dead right. Right. So
what does that mean?
And what I mean by that is that if you can cut off the energy by your investing in your sage wisdom too early in the conversation. Because curiosity and inquiry and influencing another person comes down to building a relationship. And you don't build a relationship by being the smartest person in the room all the time. You build a relationship by being curious. And your curiosity can lead to the transfer of your knowledge without it having to be a lesson to somebody else.
Definitely.
It comes from a conversation.
Right? The way we did it in my time, when I was your age, oh my God.
Right.
Okay, boomer is the at least mental response you'll get. You don't want that.
But the fact of the matter is that you have something to contribute. It's the style in which you deliver it. So it's not that what you have to offer is not going to connect. It's being clear about the fact that who you're communicating with requires a certain style of communication and influence, and you have to augment your style to build a relationship with them. And the more curious you are in understanding the way they think, the way they live, the way they honor the gifts that somebody else can give them, so sometimes it's more about observing than it is anything. So for instance, I put myself in situations quite often with lots of Gen Z and millennials and folks where I just observed the meeting and watched them interact with each other. And as a result of that, I'm able to intersect at times where I just ask questions about, tell me how you find this works for you. And they'll enthusiastically tell me about it, which then gives me a bridge to joining their conversation with something that I have to offer that's not coming from an old model that worked with my own generation, right? So
Right.
when you're crossing generations, it's almost like a different language. And languages have different nuances. Certain words mean different things, and certain innuendos mean certain things, and body language means different things. So the wisest of the folks who can cross generations, whether it be them to communicate with us and bring the best out of us, or us with them, are those who observe, inquire, connect, build trust, and listen.
Well, you've been on the front
Yeah.
lines of this because,
Right.
as I mentioned earlier, with your clients, and you've had, and obviously we have to be circumspect about not naming names or anything that
Sure.
could somebody could go, oh, that's that situation. But it's basically two teams coming together, traditional and modern. Let's call
Right.
it. I don't even want to say the age thing. Fail fast, fail often. Try hierarchical, methodical, which is too slow. And so you've seen the challenges firsthand. And so in just what's almost the argument for the let's say older worker and the younger worker is one have to adapt more to I guess the older worker has to adapt to the new way of things a little bit more dramatically than the younger one. But in your experience, I mean, what do you almost wish you could have told the older workers at the very beginning of that marriage? What do you wish you could have imbued upon them before you walked in?
I think it's to observe and listen and inquire as to why this approach. And, I was talking to an engineer yesterday who is in his 50s. And he's working with a very ambitious young entrepreneur who had hired him to help him design something. And the engineer wants to be very precise and very accurate and very focused on detail. And the entrepreneur is looking for, just give me something that I can sell.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you find the marriage as you just defined there? It's that moment where each person has to augment their style ever so slightly to understand the value of the accuracy at that moment in time in a project or a process. So the behavioral style of an accurate engineer or accountant or somebody who's into very clear detail, they always go there first. And they're not listening and inquiring as to what the entrepreneur is getting after, which is conceptual, not detail. So there's a language that needs to emerge between the generations, whereby there's cues as to, in this particular conversation, we're not looking for that kind of accuracy and detail. What I'm looking for is some help in direction, or some help in stimulating a conversation with an investor, or things of that nature. So as it pertains to a younger generation that's leading organizations today that are fueling the economy, those of us who have certain habits that have built over time, depending on the side of the business we work in or the type of work we do, we have to figure out how to work with that ready, fire, aim concept, if you will, of business that didn't exist at the trajectory that it does today. Right. So that's there's certain subtleties and nuances to building relationships and connection and sharing expertise that it doesn't have the same pace that it did in the past because of the differences in the generations' approach to the business world and the economy.
In the ding you may have heard, which was not a text that went off in my head when you were talking about that too. I mean, even transcends this intergenerational situation in that when you were talking about the engineer and the entrepreneur, and I even think about my business, and for 30 years since I left television, was learning, and I still fail at it sometimes, on how to, for lack of a better term, is how to manage expectations. Which isn't like, I need to manage expectations so you don't expect too much of me. But in other words, it's that sometimes it's like in that world, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for decades. And sometimes I will over jump what that person's thinking about. And also too, sometimes I get very bad communication in the other direction. And it really is, in the first place, in the situation, establishing expectations and educating, like for instance, saying, here's the successful process. These are the best practices in order for us to achieve this. So first of all, I'm letting you know that as much as you might want it yesterday, you still gotta put the bricks in, and that takes effort and time. But conversely, it's the client, me being sensitive to the client, and if necessary, drawing it out of them as to, let me know the situation, as you said. Maybe it's just, I need that rough. I need that viability or something just to go to an investor. I don't need schematics and how many ohms that circuit has to carry.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. And that carries over in organizations with thousands and thousands of people every day. And it reduces performance and productivity to a degree. And that's why it's really important that engineers and folks who work in that realm have the soft skills that are necessary to inquire and listen and be curious, and not be as determined to get things right at a stage when that's not what's really needed. So, you know, it's the subtleties of all those little things that are very important. And when you move into an organization that has all these layers of generations working together, you have the bumps and bruises that come from the instincts that they've had from the success factors that was set up to them in their, as they climbed, or they developed their careers or expanded their careers, if you will. And when you mix all of that chemistry together, now we have to be able to, if you will, speak French, Spanish, German, and English all in the same room. The metaphor being each different part of this generational schematic, X, Y, Z, boomers, and so on, all have a slightly different language. And the key is finding the intersections where we relate the best and bring the best value together. And that intersection is still something that organizations are desperately looking for ways in which they can increase the capacity for that to happen faster. And for that to happen faster, facilitation and management leadership skills are very important. And when you're hiring new people into an organization that are coming from the Z generation or millennial stages of development in terms of their maturity, it's their ability to have a combination of the business savvy and the soft skills together. Because understanding human interaction and human dynamics is more important than it's ever been before, because we have this strata that's much more complicated than it was before.
Yeah, when we were younger, it was up to us to learn the language and the ways of our elders and the big bosses in the company. And now it's almost the inverse of that. And
correct.
You know, it is a matter that besides an individual boomer's skills and talents and experience, it really, the differentiator really comes down to how well are they going to blend, which leads us into the next section. So we're talking about, you've got the job, or you've got the whatever kind of employment it is, whether you're a contract worker, a freelancer, a
Right.
gig worker on a professional level. Let's talk about actually getting the job and being able to demonstrate in applying for the job or applying for the gig that you're actually capable of it. And I'll open it up by something you just referenced a moment ago, and that is about a month ago. David Stewart in weareageist.com talked to about he didn't list the number, but numerous HR hiring people in the HR, the hiring part of HR with years of experience. And they said, look, you know, it's not just ageism. It's that these boomer candidates that we see are just not up to speed on the way of the world. And it's really incumbent on them to demonstrate that not only the upskilled and aligned with the way the world is, but to be able to convey that. Because as one person said, and this is what you alluded to, part of what we do is like a dating service. We fundamentally have to make sure that who we're hiring can fit in with the group they're going to be working with. And it's incumbent on boomers to be able to do that and convey that. So what is your advice to show this, demonstrate this, leverage this to find that gig or that job?
Well, to find the job or to fit in?
To find the job, first of all, just to even get the employment, because we've been kind of talking about fitting in. How do I demonstrate that so I can get a gig?
Well, you know, from the standpoint of finding the job, it's being able to use your life experience in ways that fit best in the dialogue that we've been having for the last 30 minutes, which is how do I become somebody that is adding to the evolution of innovation, if you will. And if I'm going to be adding to innovation, I have to have a style that's more oriented to inquiry and questioning and curiosity, and having a growth mindset and being open-minded and being a learner. And if you show up to that particular interview with an attitude about, I've been there and done that, and I can help you because of my experience through all the work that I've done through my career, that list of things you've done is valuable. But what's going to be more valuable is your curiosity, interest, and inquiry as to who am I going to be working with? How can I best, how would I say, add to the chemistry of that particular environment.
Not just fit in, but actually
add to the chemistry. So bringing your sage with you is part of what you contribute. But what you also want to be able to describe and have a selling point for yourself is your ability to relate to the innovation and the curiosity and the appreciation of things that are happening in a way that are different than the experience that I've had to this point in my life, if you will. So, you know, it's a matter of studying the generations as best you can, spend time with people who are of those age groups and find out more about how they think, how they innovate, what processes they use to evolve, and how they come to decisions, and what the chemistry is for their ability to ready, fire, aim, because that's the environment you're going to be working in.
Adapt or die.
Exactly. Well, that's the most simple way of putting it. That's for sure.
Sorry, but let's call it what it is.
But, you know, part of that, what you just said there, Paul, is it's more than just adapting. It's being showing that you have an interest and an attraction to being in an environment that has the dynamics that are inclusive of all the behaviors of those generations. That's very important.
Right. And in my
Hmm.
research, in terms of
Hmm.
looking for a job, whether it's in the cover letter or
Right.
somehow referenced in your resume, or certainly in an interview or networking opportunity, it's kind of like it's up to you to bring forth the fact to say, hey, let's deal with the elephant in the room. You know,
Right.
which is what I could honestly say. I have worked with younger generations who are in, you know, a different mindset than I was back then or
Hmm.
whatever. And I love that. You know, I
Hmm.
love being inclusive of it. And I love being able to, you know, bring something like you said, you know, to the chemistry, you know,
Right.
adding to the chemistry and showing that you embrace it rather than, you're right, much better than saying, well, I can adapt to it. Done. Next. Yeah.
Yeah, and be honest about what you're interested in learning.
Yeah. Oh, and
Uh,
learning's big. And learning's
right.
big. Yeah.
That's very important as well. So here's a little bit of uh, experience in the last few weeks. Uh, my daughter's home from college doing online work here with school. My wife's a chiropractor. It's a hands-on job. She's always working at her office, and she's home now. And she's never done. My wife is a few years younger than me. She's a boomer, um, and she has never done any online work, any um, coaching or support through the medium we're working with right now. And it's scary to her, really scary to her.
Same thing
And
I have. Yeah.
and I've had to lean into her in a way whereby asking questions of what's the business that you're in, to help her look at a wider frame, if you will, of what's possible for her to be able to do in this medium that we're experiencing right here between you and I, which
Mhm.
I'm used to because I work with a lot of tech clients, and I had to make that adaptation about 15 years ago, if you will. Most of my work was live coaching, live workshops, live everything. I was with people, and as a result of my work in tech, I had to adapt to this environment, if you will, to deliver a lot of the work I do. Coaching by phone, coaching this way, delivering webinars, all sorts of stuff, which was brand new for me at another time
Yeah.
and very scary.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of helping her migrate, if you will, during this time to trying to do some work with her own clients. And I said, is it about the adjustment on the table that is the most important thing that you do during the time we're experiencing right now? Or is it the wellness and health of the folks that you work with?
Right.
And what are they interested in? So for us to be able to make the adjustment um, to find our way into the chemistry of intergenerational work, it's sort of the same migration, if you will, is what is it that that the folks that we're going to be interacting with are going to want most from us. So is it to
Wait a minute. Say
say
that. I want you to say that again. That's a very good
so
point. Say that again, please.
what is it that the folks we're going to be working with in this intergenerational sort of scheme are going to want most from us? So if you look at Z and you look at millennial and you look at X and you look at fellow boomers, each one of those um, folks who fit into those age brackets are going to want things slightly different from us.
Or in a
That
way that's different. Maybe you
and
want the same thing, but I want it like this,
the
right?
delivery and how you bring it's different. Sure, that would be a good way to put it. But it's a study in human character and style, and again finding that bridge to what is going to be most valuable to the folks that are uh, of the different generations that we can bring, that is going to bring a chemistry and a result.
And you know,
And
this really comes down to, you know, what's become very popular in the corporate world over the last 5 or 6 years, which is diversity and inclusion, D&I.
sure. Hmm.
And this isn't about quotas, how many minorities, gender. It's literally that it's supposed to be a best practice for business that the more
Hmm.
diverse your workforce and your teams are, the more different looks and opinions you're going to get at the same at the problem. As one D&I
Sure.
expert said, I don't need more of me when I'm trying to make something or innovate or solve a problem. I need different viewpoints. So the inclusion thing is they create an environment in which anybody can speak up and offer their ideas, and it will be considered. The interesting thing is, and I've talked to DI&I experts about this, is that they still say, well, yes, it's different people from different nationalities, and so they never talk
Yeah.
about age. They never talk about having an older, more experienced worker in that formula to make it work. And I find that very an inadvertent ageist attitude upon part of people. But sometimes I also wonder is how much of that is our fault for not being inclusive and sensitive, as you put it, attuned to the other people as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it is about diversity, and it is about inclusion more than it has to do with race or age or culture or whatever it might be. It's the very essence of diversity and inclusion, which is who are we, what do we think, and what does our diverse opinion or thinking or experience bring to that given moment. And in order for that chemistry to work, there needs to be patience and time and respect for differences without making judgment. Because I said something earlier on, you can be right or dead right. Killing an idea of a younger person as an older manager, you lose the trust you built for the last 6 months in 2 minutes. And it works in the exact opposite way as well. So if a younger person is impatient with me and me bringing something to them, it's going to kill my trust with them.
Yeah.
So there's something to learn across the generations that we can share with each other, which is very generic, which is including diversity and inclusion into our realm with a certain degree of patience and questions and nuance that has to do with curiosity, I think, more than anything.
And when you're talking about how you can, killing that idea can kill the relationship and trust is a really good point. And it also comes to mind something I've been thinking about for years. And that's also too the fail fast, fail often. The fundamental intent on that is almost like what we heard. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. Or it's kind of like just try it and go for it, and then learn that it's going to fail. But I often see and wonder how much it becomes an excuse that, oh, this isn't working out well, or it's not quite working out right, so it's okay. I can fail fast, fail often. And I know I read in Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans. Oh my gosh, the name just went out of my head. The guy that started Netscape. Scandinavian name. Oh my gosh. Anyway, one of the creators of the modern day World Wide Web, and he made a very good point about this. And he said, and I think this is what boomers bring to the table, is that, well, sometimes it shouldn't be like, well, we failed, let's move on. Sometimes you've just got to keep going and push harder and adjust and pivot. But sometimes you got to break down the brick wall to get where you're going. You can't go around it. And I that would seem, though, to me to be a challenge where you've got a younger generation saying, hey, let's bail. This isn't going to work, as opposed to, no, I think it's going to work. We just need to do some different things. I mean, do you see that much
I do.
in your experience? I
do. The challenge with boomer and, say, with a millennial, a lot of times comes from speed and patience, that intersection. Having that blend together and become the best possible chemistry comes from each of the parties being curious as to what we can learn from where that particular person is coming from. So if the younger person is innovating very quickly using technology to get information and taking things forward, and the boomer is saying, let's take some time to think through this a little bit longer, experiment a little bit, if you will. If there's an inability for the millennial to experiment and for the boomer to work quickly, you have to find that quick experiment kind of idea. So how do we experiment patiently, quickly, if you will? It's sort of a blending of different speed. It's a blending of different ways of thinking. It's a blending of technology and non-technical thinking, right? Because sometimes it's just a matter of having a way of thinking of things in a very simplistic format, which is, let's look at what history has told us about this, which somebody who hasn't had much history doesn't relate to because they haven't been there, right? Whereas somebody who has the history relates to it because they've been through things over and over and over again, and as a result of that have iterations of understanding of going through hoops and overcoming challenges and crossing chasms and jumping over a canyon and so on, which a lot of that sage experience, when trust is built between the differences, can be of great value to both. And when the patience isn't there for that, problems exist.
I want to pivot. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and it's both parties. We have to find a way. So,
but I put out there to all boomers who are looking to fit into the chemistry and bring something to it or find that job or something. Yeah. It's really the reality is it's up to you to adapt and blend, and it's up to you to prove it and to show otherwise, because hiring a millennial or Gen Zer is easy, and it's kind of like nobody ever got fired buying IBM. Hiring a older person, you've really got to prove to them that I can assuage your concerns and show the value that I bring. It's up to us to prove it. We have to prove that every step of the way. I want to pivot to something else, and that is something you've been working on and adapting and adjusting and growing and evolving for years, and that's your total life compass. Give a brief description of it, but with the emphasis ending up on what it is and how you're applying it to the given, this generation of older people, so to speak, because this is the way it is for us with the longer health span and lifespan of technology and business economy is different and more promising than it was for previous generations. So first of all, a brief explanation on the total life compass.
Well, the total life compass is an evolution of something that I started working on in 1978. So it's had its own life, if you will, the total life compass. So it looks at 8 areas of life, mind, body, and values or spirituality as our, if you will, our core competencies, if you will, and then challenges and choices of life, which are family and financial and lifelong learning and career and social interaction and social networks and that sort of thing. So it's being able to understand what you value most, how satisfied you are, and how you're actually doing in those 8 areas of life. And the combination of those intersections of those points of what I value most and how satisfied I am and how I'm actually doing help me set goals that make life easier, make life more worthwhile, make life more results oriented if that's my focus, and more balanced and integrated, if you will. And in recent time, I've been working on a project that's focused on your best years yet, if you will, which was something that I defined for 50-year-old and beyond. And when I started talking to some of my younger clients about the concept, this was a real, how would I say, it unearthed some thinking to me that I hadn't contemplated before. And what had come up is a couple of 30-year-old high potential leaders that I was working with. I ran the idea past them, your best years yet. And they said, I need that. And I said, interesting. Yeah, I could see why you would want to do life planning and total life management type of work. But why? Do you need your best years yet? What was that about? And what was interpreted to me about their circumstances was that I'm hitting the wall a lot earlier than you did.
Yeah.
Because the speed in which they're working, they're hitting a space in their career where they're making choices about making adaptation earlier than Boomer would, if you will.
And this is like through burnout, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So the interesting concept for me around that was, maybe I should think about bringing all the generations into one room to talk about total life management or total life compass. And I did. So I brought a pilot group of folks in, a 17-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40, 50, and so on. And we had a discussion about this. And the intersection, more than anything, that folks related to the most was that career planning and life planning today are not separate. So we have to figure out how to plan our career and plan our life at the same time, if you will, so that it works for us. And how, again, when you think about, we were talking earlier in this conversation about making it work at work, it also can be something of value where intergenerational conversation about what total life compass and planning can be of great value to us being in conversation across those generations as well. So that's been a new stimulus for me in my thinking. And I haven't arrived in a place where I know what I'm actually going to do with that yet, but I know it's a value. And more importantly, the workplace of the younger generation is being styled with their life and work lives in the same space. So going back to the idea of the boomer fitting in, one of the things that you can contribute and have impact on in joining a workplace as a boomer is bringing the sage life experience you've had to a place that's interested in both life and work domains, right? So it's beyond just your work capacity,
totally.
It's your life experience that you can bring there. So, you asked me introducing the Total Life Compass as a process and a program that I've been evolving with for many years. I'm at a place, to be very honest with you, Paul, where I'm questioning what I've done with that to this point, because it's been very prescriptive to this point. You fill this out and you evaluate this and you assess this and you assess that. And what I'm starting to realize is that it could be more valuable in a dialogue conversation environment than just prescriptive. The combination of those two is going to be really important. So that I'm at a very interesting intersection with my own work of 30 years around that, in questioning what I've done. And I've gotten a lot of accolades for what I've done, and thousands of people have used this technology of mine. And what I'm starting to realize at the moment is that there's an opportunity to use this context for the intergenerational world, whereby which that idea of total life compass, having a great life and having great work in the same space, considering in the same space, is something that is going to take innovation on my part.
But
So, yeah,
innovation in execution, but not necessarily in the fundamentals of how
not in the
you
in
look.
the
I mean, what I
execution.
love about
Yeah,
it is the fact
yeah,
that you're saying, "Hey, it's not work, it's not life, it's not relate. It is this integrated, holistic uh,
it
thing
is.
in our
Yeah,
life which changes constantly." But we
right,
seem to forget that. So in our
right,
relationships, one thing I shot a video blog on today is how many people, because of the lockdown, are suddenly out of their habit relationships, like with a spouse or a significant
right.
other or whatever. And you're used to having my life and your life and going here and timing and everything else, and all of a sudden you're thrown in together, and it's just like retirement, where one or the other or both suddenly retire. And it's, well, to cut it short, it's the reason why there is a spike in the divorce rate amongst retirees. I mean, 25% chance you'll get a divorce because you're assuming that the way things were are the way they are now. And when I looked at your total life compass for the first time, I thought, this is brilliant, because it takes everything into account, and especially the fact that we change. As Jung said, what was truth
Right,
in the morning is a lie in the afternoon. And so I
right.
would think foundationally, it's still very true. You're talking about changing maybe the process, or what?
Right, yeah, it's a matter of having life management and career management be sort of in sync,
Mhm.
if you will, right? So the more that that's in sync, the better. So, let's take, for instance, in the past, we went to school and educated ourselves for a career. We had the career, and then we retire.
Right.
Um, that lifeline today is not, it's intermittent. It's I, I, I learn and I work, and then I have to upskill again.
Mhm.
And I might take sabbatical to do that, or I might define my work day differently than a boomer might have in early stages of their career. You work 9 to 5, and then you after work you went and did whatever you did. Today, people take 2 hours off in the middle of the day, and they do something for their life, and they come back, and they compartmentalize their organization for their life, so both life and work.
Right.
And that concept in the new workplace is natural. So the newer evolving workplaces, if you're going to go participate in that environment, you're going to have to be comfortable with the intermittentness of high levels of focus, time off. High levels of focus, time off. And that time off for what? To have my life and have my work, so that my work is purposeful. I have my passion. I have my energy. I'm managing my stress effectively. I'm taking time for relationships and things of that nature. Um, so all of that, it has brought up, for somebody who's been a behavioral scientist, if you will, around the idea of life management and life work practices over the years. My recent sort of aha, if you will, has been a combination of thinking about how to bring that to the workplace rather than it be a retreat.
Right.
Right.
Well, I tell you,
That, mm,
it's not Mad Men. It's not the
yeah,
world of Mad Men or Ozzie and Harriet
right.
anymore. So let's get over it, and let's get on with it. Mark, this has been absolutely fantastic. So
Mm.
many things. I mean, this is one of those interviews might be worth for some people to listen to twice. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Um, uh, well, through my website is probably the best place to do that, which is michelsonleadership.com. And all my details are there. So if you want to email me, it's mark@michelsonleadership.com, and my phone number is on my
In there too. And by
website,
the
and
way,
then
that's
so on.
Mark,
You know,
Mark with a
Mark with a
C.
C.
Mark
Mark
with
with
a
a C.
C. Mark,
Yeah.
thank you ever so much. And I really hope sooner than later, what you're doing with the Total Life Compass, when you get to that point, let's do another
Yeah,
interview
and the
solely
detail
on
of
that.
Total Life Compass and the work on the websites it's there, and anybody who wants more information about that can see it there.
Okay. Marc,
Okay.
thank you so much. Stay safe.
Okay, thank you.